Thank you for joining me in the last session. We've covered the introduction of money, the fiat money, impact of the fiat money, and some key concepts, and what Quran and Hadith say about Riba. Now I'll come to Islamic banking, give an overview of the conventional banking, go into the next step in Islamic banking. Hopefully that'll be useful. Before we go into Islamic banking, I want to give you an overview of the banks and the banking system today. It's really working very well today, although it has riba in it, and we need to take the good parts and see how we can actually improve it. Uh, when we look at the banks today, they do financial intermediation, right? They take the money in, from the public and then give it out for all sorts of good things. The payment and settlements, I've covered that before. It does a significant amount of work. I won't go through the rest of the slide in detail, but we'll cover each of the functions next. Deposit protection is an important service in most of the advanced economies where the sovereign has institutions like in US, there's FDIC, in Canada, there's CDIC. They provide insurance of deposits for, let's say in Canada, $100,000 of your deposits are insured, and in the US, $250,000 are insured. That means that if the bank goes under, you're still okay and you'll be able to recover your money. It's a really good practice. A tons of work has been done to ensure that it works properly. And when banks fail, at least the people who are not as rich get their money back. And that system still needs to evolve, but it's working very well at the moment. Risk management is a very advanced function of the banks. Banks manage risk very well, whether they are doing it on a trading desk, whether they are doing it when they're lending money out to people, or whether they're taking care of operations, implementing systems. There are a lot of aspects where and thousands of PhDs are being employed to actually calculate and measure and manage the risk. Credit risk is where the banks give money and they want to make sure that they can actually measure the risk given to a risk of the borrower. And there are many rules for those, and it's a highly complex area. Market risk is where the changes of rates in the market, whether it's currency, whether it's other things, that change of those can be managed, and it's done through market risk. And there are complicated formulas and systems that actually work for it. Operational risk is also very important because it has tons of processes to ensure that if there are failed internal processes, human errors, if the systems are inadequate or something else happens, then those risks are managed properly and they are measured properly. Liquidity risk is where the bank become illiquid because depositors want their money back and there's a run on the bank, or there could be other adverse events. Liquidity risk is managed by the banks by instructions of regulators. They keep highly liquid assets in their portfolio, so if something goes wrong, they're able to trade, and there are lots of rules around that as well. So liquidity risk is very well managed as well. Capital in Basel is my area of expertise that I've been working on for a very long time. And this is where the bank is required to keep enough capital to withstand any risk that actually goes haywire, and we are able to ensure that the bank remains solvent at all times. These are very complex rules, and these are generally controlled globally through Basel, BIS, Bank of International Settlements, and the rules are very useful. They can actually be applied to most institutions. Availability of credit is also a very important function of the current banks. When you look at credit creation, yes, you need to understand that currently it is done through fractional banking, which causes a lot of problem. We need to curtail that or put a stop to it so that the banks can only lend technically on an equity basis, so that they actually are partners in risk and not really giving all the rest to the person who is borrowing, and provide collateral to get some sort of comfort that things won't go wrong. So a lot of changes need to be made, but at the moment the banks are doing a great job at credit creation. It helps the giving loans to families, to small businesses. The small businesses are really the driver for any economy. It also provides financing to major businesses and governments. There's a multiplier effect as you lend to the businesses. Ultimately, it really improves the helps the economy as well. Um, all of this is controlled through the central bank policies as well, where they actually define capital rules and sound underwriting practices, so growth is sustainable. And they are supported by significant amount of effort that is put in by their risk management units to mitigate credit risk and ideally to identify, measure, report, price, and manage all of the risks that they take. It's a significant amount of effort that is put in by the bank. Where are we in history right now? This is a very important 15 years or maybe 10, 15 years that we'll go through. The dominance of world is shifting, and power is slowly going from the west to the east and south. And when this power shift happens throughout history, we have seen that it's not given up easily. It comes with wars, with economic upheaval, and there's a chance of debasement of currency, hyperinflation. You need to be prepared for that. There's also at the same time AI is also coming in, so and possibly superintelligence would come in as well at the same time. The workforce would be turned upside down. There'll be mass unemployment. Possibly there would be universal basic income introduced so that everybody, irrespective of whether they are working or not, they will get basic income at home. There might be civil interest because it's very, very hard to just satisfy a large population who is unemployed. One important thing to note is that Western nations, or almost all of the nations, are heavily indebted because there's no link to gold anymore. All the governments are printing money like crazy. They get inflation, they reduce their debt through inflation and keep printing more and more money. But what happens is that GDP seems to be increasing, but it's only artificial. Wealth is declining, bubbles are being created, and that causes a lot of anxiety. Money goes from low income to high income people, and it's a steady transition or transfer of wealth from one place to another. Housing bubbles are created. So what happens is people feel they can get money very easily. Inflation is, let's say, 10%, but the central bank would keep the interest rate low to 2.5%, or maybe even less. And because of that, uh, mortgages can be obtained at a very low rate. Housing would go up at a rapid pace while you are not paying enough interest to cover those costs. And that's why the housing bubbles are slowly created, which wreck the economy completely. And this is one of the way in which money is being transferred from the poor to the rich. Um, One important thing is most of the people in the West do not see gold and silver to hold any value. And we see a lot of innovation happening in the financial world and the fintech world in money creation like Bitcoins. But what we have seen is that most of the innovation is coming, if not everything, is coming from the West. Uh, it's not coming from the Islamic countries. Yes, China and India and other places are actually contributing as well, but not much is coming from the Islamic world. We need to make sure that when we go about making changes, we do not reinvent the wheel. What is there, we should take as much out of it as possible. Islam was seen as the most progressive and tolerant religion, but after the death of Prophet Muhammad SAW, somehow we became highly intolerant, and there was a lot of infight. People like Imam Bukhari were prosecuted to obtain the wrong fatwas. Islam was distorted by people. A lot of scientists had to go through tough times, like Ibn Sina was jailed. We had the House of Knowledge, and all new creations were coming from Baghdad and from major cities in Muslim world to today, where we are seen as the most illiterate nation across the globe. Most Islamic countries are ruled by thugs or agent of other countries, and most governments rely on remittances instead of actually producing anything. They're just relying on remittances. Yes, it could be because of IMF and World Bank domination, so that the countries can't do much. But the thugs and agents are really curtailing our growth. Allah has given a lot of wealth to Muslims in the shape of oil and natural resources and mines that people have, but we are not utilizing it. We are not doing anything in the cutting edge technology, and we don't produce much except for grain and other stuff. Uh, Muslims do not anymore take it as their religious duty to acquire knowledge and to be the best in everything. We need to be the best in everything, whether it's finance, economics, science, arts, or anything else. New Islamic banking, instead of actually looking forward, it's looking backward for conformity. What they're doing is they're taking the current products and just wrapping it into Islamic gift back by calling it profit or some catchy name, but it's more expensive and more riskier for the customers. So we need to think about that. We also need to move away from product development more to more rules and principles that really should be defined at length by our senior people. Where do we go from here? So, first thing is, in my view, we cannot rely on fiat money. With the amount of inflation in the Muslim world, we will never be able to really implement interest-free banking properly. Like, there is inherent riba in every transaction because the currency is undergoing 15 to 20% inflation, if not higher in most of the countries. First thing we need to do is invent Islamic money, right? Come up with something like a new crypto, a Bitcoin, but or maybe an index, which actually is very simple. So it needs to have certain rules, right? It is critical before we introduce any of the products because the products will be based on it. The new Bitcoin type currency or an index or whatever you want to call it, first thing is it needs to be limited in supply. So, like gold, like silver, it needs to have a limit, right? The only thing is that whoever introduces it at the inception should not own everything. So, there needs to be an equitable distribution at inception. It needs to hold value, so somehow we need to give it power to be able so people can start seeing it as value from day one. It should be divisible and fungible so that it can be easily divided and then transactions can actually be done on it. It should be outside the control of the central banks and politicians. It should be secure and borderless and efficient, and it should be easy to use as a medium of exchange. So in a bank, in a supermarket, and other places, systems should be able to accept it as payment. Uh, we might think about using a gold, silver basket of wheat or something else to actually support the index, support that coin, whatever you want to come up with. But that's the first invention that needs to come in before we actually do anything. We also need to ensure that the new currency cannot be hijacked by the corrupt politicians and clerics and bankers and the business elite. And somehow we have to keep a check that they cannot create inflation in that, um, or to devalue it in any way. We need to define sound Islamic guidelines and principles. So, very clear roles and responsibilities for depositors, investors, borrowers or other people, what would be the bankers and advisors be doing, and what's the intermediary doing? What are their roles and responsibilities? How do they earn? What is the role of the regulator, Bethel Mall, central banks, religious clerics, economists? Like, what are the financial analysts and technical advisors doing? And, if there are witnesses or agents, what is their roles and responsibilities? It should be based on Sharia rules and very clearly identifying what needs to happen. We also need a rating agency. The rating agency needs to not only be rating the borrower, like the companies, but also the borrowers, directors, and other. And it should be very, very translucent. It shouldn't just give one rating, it should give everything that supports the rating. And it should not be employed by the company that is getting the rating. It should be somehow controlled by outside. So rating should easily be available on everybody. Data maintenance is very important because in open world you need to know about the people you're dealing with, and there should be ample information available and data available, but which is balancing in transparency and privacy. So the information should be available, so that the reporting agencies can actually take this data and make it available to people. We need to develop governance laws, and which strongly condemns injustice, exploitation, and we need to make sure that things like that do not, like something injustice does not happen. Um, and the people who are making these rules and regulations should not be compensated by the banks or by the financial intermediaries or the investors. So they need to somehow be independent and maybe get their income in some other way. And it should not be transaction specific. In order to ensure that transactions start to happen soon, you need to have sample documentation available that people can adopt. If I want to do a mortgage with somebody else and I need to give this money to a relative of mine or a friend of mine, there should be simple documentation available, calculators available, which we can use to easily take a transaction and get it done. We don't need to go to other people. So I think simple documentation, simple calculators, and other things should be available to the general public and to small, medium sized enterprises so that they can start doing things on their own and not purely rely on river based institutions. uh, there should be clarity on payment, so very clear on how, when and how much will be paid by whom to whom. So those rules should be very clear in the documentation. We need to develop a complex legal system to support the banking transaction, and it should be across boundaries. So if you're doing a transaction in Dubai, you should be able to implement it sitting in Pakistan or in India or in Canada. Every transaction should be following the same legal framework. It should be so attractive because I think everybody is tired of fiat money and inflation, and I'm absolutely sure that within some years this bubble will burst, and this inflation and this system will go bust. At that time, or even before that, you need to make this new system very, very attractive so that people start following it very soon. Don't restart inventing the wheel. Uh, just copy what is there. This, or maybe utilize BIS to come up with, a starting point documentation. Take the help of major institutions globally. Islamic principles are based on justice, transparency, and avoidance of exploitation. We need to define those principles very, very well. Um, there should be no compromises on faith, ethics, and social responsibility. These are given. We need to ensure that the taxation structure it takes into account the real economy underlying. And when people are borrowing and lending, it should be based on real risk taking. You should know the underlying business that we are lending to, and the risk should actually be known, and not only known but shared, so that people do not let just the borrower suffer. It should actually be, a partnership. We should not just, or banks should not just rely on collateral, that okay, I got the collateral, I'm fine. We should rely on possibly personal guarantees, of the people whose words are worth in gold. So personal guarantees will need to be given preferences over time, because we need to get the people who know behind it, or behind the transaction, so that we avoid the kind of losses that major banks are facing these days. Remove the fractional reserve system, so that if you have $100, you can't lend out $200. It needs to be tayyib, alternative for everybody. Um, in Islam, trade is halal and riba is haram. So we need to move away from riba, interest-based funding, and to move to trade-based funding. It's not going to be easy. So we need to maybe remove the role of the central bank, because central bank keeps printing money, and which is governed by the corrupt politicians, or at least controlled by the corrupt politicians. And maybe we need to make their function very different, and they should look at the purity and weights the way it was, or maybe look at the principles and ethics behind everything today. Trust. A call to action: do your research, consult qualified scholars, consult professionals, keep the conversation respectful. One thing very important, that whatever words are used, the comments that are given back, please be respectful. Think of yourself before commenting as a Muslim. Would you like a dialogue to improve our system for the future, or would you like to do what a lot of paid thugs are doing in most of the countries today? Um, One thing, and this is a challenge for all of the Islamic banking experts. Before I begin, before I go into other things, one thing I'm giving as a challenge to my bankers today. I want to loan a Pakistani rupee loan to cover the cost of a school, 80% of the cost. I will give the rest of the 20%. The school would be 500 students. We will take care of all of the running cost. You need to give 80% of the money. I will not personally not make a single penny on the investment. I will repay the whole loan, exact amount without interest to you in 10 years, right? I will give back, I'll give to you a collateral in gold saying, you don't need to take risk. You gave me, let's say, 200,000 rupees, you will get back 200,000 rupees, right? Exactly the same amount after 10 years. You don't believe in interest, right? Okay, give me an interest free loan. 10 years, exactly the same money, right? And the name of the lender and my name will not be seen in this transaction. In creation of the school, we will all remain anonymous, and the ajr will be with Allah. So if you really want your ajr to be with Allah, give me a loan to create this school. And I personally don't think any Islamic banker would come forward, but prove me wrong. There might be people who actually do believe in Islam. Thank you very much. This is the end of presentation. Hope you gained out of this.